And we're going.
Okay. Hello. What I'm going to do today is try to teach you how to lay out a fly rod, a method I use. It's a Don Morton with a land modification, I guess. And what you need to do first is start out with a jig. This is two pieces of square hollow brass tubing. You can get at Micro Mart, or usually a lot of hobby stores have them also. And if you get them from Micro Mart, you might want to check with some of your buddies because you essentially have to buy it in bulk. But you'll need two different sizes, a small one and a larger one that fits right over it and slides up and down because you'll use this as your jig. You also need some flat stock when you get the square to make these two little Y-shaped projections that you solder onto these slides. And the height of these is really not critical because this is just to get you into the ballpark anyway. Now, what I do is I get my rod set up and I have the handle glued on, and now the tip top is on. And since this is a 9-foot fly rod and I have an 8-foot ceiling, I have to take the first piece off and set it aside. And what I want to do is to bend this blank approximately 90 degrees. What I use is a piece of fly line that I put a hook on the end of it. I cut the tip off and then so that it's blunt, and then I tie it like a bow and I pull it down to where it's about 90 degrees and tie it off. The reason I use fly line is because it's easy to tie, easy to see, and it's easy to get the knot out. So now we've got our rod. It's actually been a little more than 90 degrees, but that's close. Now, what I want to do is to take this over to my chart that I've got on the wall. This is also something that Don Morton came up with so that I can tell them about where the guides will go. Have this at 90 degrees. You want to hold it till it's perpendicular to some of the lines, and then you move it up or down to where it fits inside between two lines. And this is a pretty fast tip, but I'd say it's right about in there somewhere. Now, when you're holding it there, you'll want to mark the very top. And of course, my grandkids were in here and they messed up my tape. Find your place. This is pretty close right here, and you want to put a guide right where this blank almost touches the line above it, which is right about there. So my first guide will be right there. Now, going back to my jig that I made, I set this jig on this blank with it still bent, and I slide it until there's a little bit of a gap. It's not quite touching the blank. I set that aside without moving it. Now I can undo my blank. Get the fly line off. And I want to measure the distance between these 2 points. And I use a metallic ruler and I use the metric side because it's just easy to remember or to use. And the distance between those is about 70 millimeters. So that's my base measurement that I will use to lay out the guides. Put my blank back together. Put it in my lathe. Lock it down. Now, my first guide is going to go right here. So I'm going to mark that. With a pencil. That way I know where the first guide goes. Now, I take a pocket calculator that I paid $1 for at Walmart. Of course, it's made in China. And I put the base number in here, which was 70. Now, I'm going to move from this point toward the tip top. So I divide that number by 1.1. That didn't work. 70 divided by 1.1, and that comes out to about 63, 64 millimeters. So I start at my base point here, and using my metric rule, I measure about 63, 64, and I put another mark. Now that's where my second guide will go. And then I take the number that's still on the calculator and divide that by 1.1, and that comes out to be about 57, 58. And then I mark this about the same, and I do that till I get out to the tip top, or almost to the tip top. And the next one will be right about there, so I'm not even going to measure that one. I'll just eyeball it. Now, go back to the 70. This time we're going to multiply it by 1.1 because we're going toward the handle, and it comes out to 77. So I've got my base point here, measured out to 77. And this is approximation. And I keep doing that all the way down, and I try to put a guide on every joint where they go together. So sometimes you may have more guides in there than you think you need, but if you like to put a guide on that, that's what I do. Now I take it all the way down to about this junction of the first two pieces, and I stop right there. Then what I do is I measure from wherever I put this guide back toward the butt. I measure, and this is where I switch over to English system. Just turn my ruler over, and I measure back 4 1/2 inches, and I put a mark there. And of course my tape's right in the wrong place. Now that's where the first stripper guide will go, and then I measure back 4 1/4. And I put the second stripper guide there, and I use this stripper, or this guide will be a stripper also, and that's how I lay it out. Then I just put all my guides on, and I'm finished. If you have any questions, call me.